What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here. This is Arrow Season 4, Episode 2, The Candidate. Um, if you watched my first episode review, then you know I was asking the question about how to watch these episodes and stuff. Until I hear that it's not worth it, I'm going to go ahead and go one episode of Flash, one episode of Arrow, one episode of Flash, one episode of Arrow, just because that's how it was released. So unless somebody says, it's not worth your time, I'm just gonna stick to it like this. Um, but yeah, this one more interesting than the last one, mainly because they focused less on Oliver and Felicity in this episode. Um, it's just my number one issue right now is that, and the fact that still trying to be forced upon us is a thing. Anyway, but there was a lot less of that in this episode, so that was nice to see. But you've got a little bit of a three-way storyline in this one. You've got kind of the overarching story for this season, which is Damien Dark, the Hive, and who's going to run for mayor. That whole thing. For some reason, Damien Dark is very concerned about who's going to run for mayor. Um, I guess he's I don't know. The way that Captain Lance was talking to Oliver made it sound like he thinks Damien Dark is going to be somebody who operates in the light, not in the dark, which I don't understand how you can look at what he's done and still support him. Obviously he's kind of being threatened into it because Dark is threatening Laurel, but it's kind of like, I'm pretty sure Laurel can handle herself. She's got a good team now. That reason doesn't fly very well with me, especially once Laurel finds out that you're helping him. She's not gonna be happy with you. So anyway, I find it hard to understand his reasoning for even if it is just for threats. I mean, I feel like it's got to be for something more, right? Um, So anyway, but what he says to Oliver makes it sound like the reason he's not supporting him is because of how he operates in the dark. Um, but I hate that final scene between them where it just it feels like this always happens in shows like this where there's a misunderstanding and Oliver's trying to change how he does stuff. He's trying not to shoot up a bunch of guys with arrows, and then because Thea kind of goes crazy for a second and ends up burning the guy, he's just like, oh, so now you're not sticking him full of arrows, now you're burning him alive. And he's just like, look, that wasn't, it's like, whatever, and just cuts him off before he even has a chance to explain. I'm like, why does this always happen? Like, in every show where there's something like this, where somebody misunderstands something, instead of listening to the explanation, they always just cut them off while they're in the middle of explaining and just say, I don't want to hear it. The only reason I'm not arresting you for murder is because he's still alive. And I'm just like, dude, listen to what he has to say. It wasn't him. But because you're so, I don't like you right now, and I can't agree with what you're doing, despite the fact that you're helping Damien Dark, it's like, what's the point? Why are you acting like this? I don't get it, and it's frustrating. And the longer this drags on, where Lance is all about, oh, I don't like you, Oliver. You're a killer. He's not anymore. He's clearly not. He's trying to change. He's told you that he's changing. And just because one thing happens and you don't even want to hear an explanation for what happened, you're just instantly going back to, I don't like you. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to see characters be so stubborn to where they won't even hear the truth because they're that stubborn. Anyway, moving on from that, you've got the story of Speedy and what she's going through right now. Her return from the Lazarus Pit left her with the bloodlust, and she's dealing with that. Oliver notices she's kind of going overboard, and she doesn't want to hear it. And then they have that scene where he's provoking her until eventually she attacks him and really going at him. And that's when he kind of lets her know what happened and all this stuff. It feels like more conflict for Speedy and Oliver. Thea and Oliver, whatever. Um, it feels like more conflict for them to have to work through, and not that I don't understand there has to be conflict between characters sometimes, but it feels like from beginning of season one, there's always been a conflict between Thea and Oliver. Every single episode. Like, if why does it always feel like they have to fight about something? You know, not all siblings are like that. Not all siblings are fighting all the time. Some of them are. You know, me and my brother. I mean, if there's ever a time when we're not fighting, it's a miracle. So I don't understand why this show feels like it always has to have Thea and Oliver fighting about something, arguing over something, disagreeing on something. It gets a little old. I'd like to see them change it up a little bit to where, in near the end of the third season, they actually started getting along before Oliver went to Nanda Parbat and had to, revive her from the Lazarus Pit. They actually started to get along, and I was enjoying it. And then Raish comes in, stabs her, and then she gets revived, and things are back to being bad again. Um, so yeah, that was a tad bit frustrating. The the storyline for this one, this episode, as far as the main story goes, this friend of the Queen's comes in. She's planning on running for mayor because she was friends with Moira, uh, and she wants to carry on her legacy. And so I honestly thought she was going to be a bigger part of the show. I thought she really was going to try to run for mayor, and she was going to stand. But at the end of this one, she ends up getting scared out of it too because her daughter gets kidnapped and put in danger by this guy. Uh, the this character is the one thing about this episode that I really did enjoy, because it was kind of interesting to see. Like, at first I thought Darhk had just hired him to do exactly what he did. Try to kill her and then try to get her out of this position any way possible. But it became apparent very quickly that Darhk wants it done a specific way. He doesn't want this guy's style. Like, it's very spastic and sporadic and messy is what he eventually calls it. And so, kidnapping the daughter, he's like, you've put her, you fix this now. You solve this problem. So it was kind of interesting to see that little bit of a conflict between Darhk hiring somebody and then this guy not doing it how Darhk wants it to be done. Like, what would you have preferred then? Because that's what I'm interested to see, is how Damien Dark wants his problems handled. How does he want this guy to act when he's dealing out the dirty work for him? So that's interesting to see. The other interesting thing was Dark was talking to this guy and said something about, you like to stir up anarchy. And I was like, is that a subtle reference to Anarchy, the character? Because I know a bit about him from Batman. He was in Batman Arkham Origins, the game. And so whenever he said Anarchy, I'm like, nah, probably not. But then whenever they're taking him to the hospital, and then Captain Lance gets called to the ambulance, and then sprayed inside is the Anarchy symbol, I'm like, oh, that was Anarchy. Awesome. Because that's a fun character, one that just has no... His only motivation is, like Dark said, to spread anarchy, to just really try to cause chaos. It's a fun... I love characters like that. Like, the Joker is definitely a bit more calculating than Anarchy is, but he's got the same motive in mind, just to spread chaos because it's fun for him. Most of it centers around Batman, but I just love characters like that because they're so chaotic and you never know what they're gonna do. Whereas, people like Dark, you can kind of guess his motives. You can, after a bit of research, you can start to figure out his plan, what he's going to do, the plot that he has in place. So yeah, it's fun to have a bit of chaos thrown in for a character. So having Anarchy in there is fun to see. Let's see. The other two storylines, though, outside of the main one, is, well, okay. You have the main plot, which is Damien Dark and all that stuff. You have Speedy with the Lazarus Pit, which also, I knew this was coming eventually because of Legends of Tomorrow, but at the end of this episode, Laurel takes Thea to Sarah's grave and starts digging up the grave. I'm like, okay, so after they found out about this Lazarus Pit, now she's finally got it in her mind. Maybe it can bring Sarah back. That's interesting. I wish it had taken a little bit longer to make that leap, but I'm glad that it was Laurel that brought it up. Because I thought, after Nyssa got accepted back in under Malcolm's wing to the League of Assassins, I figured it would be her that would try to revive Sarah because, Sarah was her one true love. So it's nice to see that Laurel is the one that actually thinks of it and is like, wait, if the Lazarus Pit did this for Thea, she even has that. The thought was a bit vague, but still handled fairly well enough, where she's talking to Thea about it, and she's like, well, of course he did. He would do anything to save his sister. And they didn't really do it extremely well, but you could kind of catch the inference that she would do the same thing for her sister, anything to save her sister. So that's what ends up leading to digging up Sarah's grave. So, it was handled well enough, I guess. Better than some of the story arcs in this. But the final storyline going on is the Palmer Industries. I think that's what it's called now. Anyway. But Felicity is now head of it. She is running it. She's dealing with this fact that the company is kind of not doing well financially. This one guy who seems... He just seems like, one of those unassuming guys in the office who does his work very well, but ultimately kind of gets the short end of the stick a lot because he's a bit too nice. So he ends up creating this algorithm that was supposed to help find out how they could, make sure people kept getting paid despite, or make sure people got raises and are getting paid enough despite what they're dealing with right now with the financial crisis. But it ended up being used to turn around and say, here's who we need to fire to keep this business going. Decision made by the higher-ups, which I feel like this is the show kind of taking a jab at like CEOs of business and stuff, saying, oh, you don't care about the little guys. And maybe that's what they're trying to say, I don't know. But anyway, for the story's sake, it starts off as she's having to fire people. And then at some point she kind of realizes, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not who I am. It's not what Raymond would want. So she ends up hiring those people back and fabricating a story that this guy that created the algorithm actually has some ideas that are going to get this company back online. I'm like, more lies! Yay! My last review I talked about how frustrating it is that at first this show was built on Oliver lying to everybody to try to keep them safe, from his secret life. Now it's everybody else lying to other people. To Oliver, Felicity's now lying to this board of people. I don't know. It's kind of frustrating to see everybody was getting so pissed at Oliver because he was lying all the time. And now they're just lying and lying and lying. I'm like, come on. Isn't that a bit hypocritical of these characters? And it's the writers doing it. The writers are the ones writing this story, and so they're the ones getting these characters to lie. It's like, do you not see the hypocrisy that you're creating right now? Maybe they do. Maybe they'll come back and they'll have some clever way to tie it all together for them to be like, okay guys, we were on to Oliver for all of this time because he was lying. Maybe we need to take a step back and reevaluate. Maybe. Don't know. Probably not. But we'll see. So far, though, it's been a pretty good season. The action is still good. So that's the one thing the show is always going to have. Even though it gets bad at some points, even though it gets frustrating, the action's always good. And I don't know. That's not... I shouldn't say that's enough to make it a good show, because there are movies that have had great action, Transformers, that were just terrible movies, but the action was good. So you can't really say that having good action makes it a good show, but I think it's the good action on top of the fact that some of these stories are pretty good. Not all of them, but at least half are good stories. At least in my opinion. So, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. What did you think of this episode going forward? What did you expect to see later? Leave a like and subscribe. Oh, by the way, no spoilers. Like and subscribe for more Arrow, and I'll see you at the next review. Peace out.